So we wanted this to be an Ashes series like 1981 or 2005. It's been really, really good. There's still one game to go, but the weather has intervened and we're not going to get a big showdown at the Oval. Australia are retaining the Ashes, whatever we take that to mean. It's 2-1 going into the last game. There's loads to discuss. It's still been an absolute showcase of cricket. Lots of exciting stuff to get into with two of the great people to talk about it with. That's Mike Atherton and Gideon Haigh from The Times. Good to speak to you both. Morning.
Hi there.
Morning, Stig.
Athers, let's start with the weather. Get that out of the way if we may. How do you respond to this? It is antediluvian in the real sense of the word. It is grotesquely old-fashioned that a game of sport in 2023 is ended because it rains a little bit in a place where it rains quite often.
You've come to the Mancunian for that answer. That is my hometown and I'm going to defend it. I mean, what can you do about the weather? I've heard all manner of crazy theories in the days following that test match. People talking about the stadium should have a roof on it. You should be playing till 11 o'clock at night. It rains. It rains occasionally in England. It is very unlucky that you get 5 sessions washed out in July, it must be said. And England were incredibly unlucky in that game. But I'm afraid it rained. And there's not much to be done about that. So I don't buy a lot of the mad theories that I've read about. Incredibly unlucky, devastating for the final game, really. As you say, the series is still alive, but it's not what it would have been. 2-2 going to the Oval would have been a fantastic spectacle. And I suspect all the momentum would have been with England, but it's not to be.
What about things like, other sports where, in golf and tennis, they have extra days? You could look ahead to the weather and say, well, we know it's going to be rubbish at the weekend, so we'll get in an extra 20 overs here, 20 overs there. We'll start at 9, we'll finish at 8. Things like that, where you're going to have a problem. Could you address it in advance, or do you just accept that life is unfair and therefore sport is unfair?
Well, it is. I mean, how many times do forecasters get it wrong? Yeah. So you could, on that theory, on a Friday, cram an extra 2 hours in, and maybe on a Saturday, suddenly blue skies on the Sunday, and all the people who bought tickets on the Sunday feel very short-changed. There's problems whichever way you look at it. And the extra day is fine in theory, but as Gideon would tell you, the modern scheduling is so crammed anyway, it would become impossible. Broadcasters, what do? Do you pay people for that extra day up front? People planning to buy tickets for the extra day. It is incredibly complex. It's easy to say it, complex to organise. I'm afraid rain has just always been a part of cricket, especially in England, especially in Manchester, and I suspect it always will be.
Gideon, how much does this matter to you? Because you've been on this show all the time saying you wanted 2-2, go to the Oval. Yeah. I expect the Australians, who've now been touring for a long time, Pat Cummins has played 5 games in a row. I'd imagine he wanted a showdown. This is not a team that strikes me wants to retain the Ashes by some wet weather on a weekend in Manchester. How do you think the Australians feel about it? How do you feel about it all?
Well, I mean, the evidence that we have for Cummins' perspective is the press conference that he held after the game. And he looked very nonplussed, frankly. He looked really quite subdued. He realised that to retain the Ashes under these circumstances was very anticlimactic. Don't forget that cricketers are also cricket lovers. They like the game to peaks and troughs, drama and excess, and they want to be part of great spectacles. And nothing could have been more anticlimactic about this series, which has been played in an excellent spirit and to a very high standard, to have ended so abjectly. And I think that there is something very strange about the provenance or the circumstances of this last test. It's kind of it's a Schrodinger's test. It's simultaneously alive and dead. It's dead as far as the Ashes are concerned, but the series can still be tied. And both teams, I'm sure, will be thoroughly motivated when it comes to it, but they'll also be very, very tired. And it will be a struggle for both of them to come up to the mark after so much cricket in such a short period of time. Particularly Australia, who of course have played the extra Test match this summer, or the extra high intensity Test match, because England played a 4-day Test match against Ireland. You looked at Cummins, and he also looked very, very weary after Old Trafford.
He actually looked that in the field. I mean, one of the striking things about this Test match, which may be overlooked actually because of the non-conclusion, was actually it looked like a bridge too far for Cummins, potentially, that he had this horrible position where he had to be captain and very tired fast bowler. And when England start hooning the ball all over the pitch, and when your captain needs to be able to be cool and work out what to do, he looked knackered on the field, it felt to me, actually, Gideon. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think there was a bit of confusion in Australian ranks on that day. The team seemed to have multiple captains, lots of people gesturing, lots of people moving the field. In some ways, I think trying to help Cummins handle his multiple responsibilities, but also adding to a general sort of air of chaos. It can happen to any captain where a game runs out of their control. And I think Australia realised that coming into this series, that the way that England play, there will be sessions, there will be phases, there may even be days where you'll feel completely powerless, and it will simply be a matter of hanging on for dear life. And that certainly was the case on the third day at Old Trafford.
Yeah. Athers, in the end, do England pay the price for the first two games? Actually, this could be, and we'll get to whether it matters to England to draw 2-2, whether retaining the Ashes means anything or not. Does it matter if you lose 2-1 or 3-1 versus a draw at 2-2? England is still not going to have the Ashes, whatever happens. But are they really paying the penalty? This should have been 1-1 going into the Headingley. It shouldn't have been 2-0 down, which was a very, very big hole to dig yourself out of. And indeed, no one's really ever done it before, have they?
No.
Only one team has come back from 2-0 down to win 3-2, and you've got to go back to before the Second World War, and a team led by possibly the greatest cricketer of all time. So they left themselves with no room for error. I think, the readers under the line, the comments under the line from some of our pieces in the last couple of days, there's been a lot of fractious kind of comment. You have to differentiate between the bad luck in this game at Old Trafford and one went before. I don't think anybody could argue that England were unlucky at Old Trafford to lose 5 sessions in mid-July, a game that they would have won, I think, despite what Andrew McDonnell, the Australian coach, says and thinks. England would have won that game. So that is unlucky. However, as you rightly say, they left themselves no margin for error because of what had happened earlier in the series. Now, at Lord's, Australia were pretty much the better side there, and Stokes' innings in that second innings slightly camouflaged some failings there. England got carried away with their batting, and at Edgbaston they will look back at drop catches, mis-stumping, bowling Khawaja off a no ball, all the extras, all that kind of thing. And that's a game they will feel that they could have and should have probably won, but it wasn't to be for partly through their own errors. And they left themselves with no margin for error. 2-0 down, you've got to win all 3 in a country where a test can easily be affected by rain, as it was in Manchester. For sure, England will look back with regret at that first game in particular at Edgbaston.
Should we talk about the actual cricket, though, that we did get at Old Trafford? Because there was some magical cricket before the rain came, particularly, I suppose, for Zach Crawley. And someone drew my attention that he scored a 189, didn't he? And they were reminded of one of your great test innings, Athers, of 185. And I think he got to that score something like 250 balls quicker than you did, 300 balls quicker than you did, something like that. It really was a piece of cricket. It will get lost now, won't it? No one ever remembers Zach Crawley's massive century. It won't be an Ashes deciding century. It wasn't even a game deciding century. But in the time, it was a moment, wasn't it?
Yes, I think people